Hey there, it's Corey Bretz. I wanted to share with you a little bit of a film done a few years ago now, but a great example of how three siblings got together to make a family movie about their own genealogy, their own ancestry who come over from Europe, many years earlier, and were actually homesteaders, digging in the scrabble of the hills and valleys of Saskatchewan, and building sod houses and raising cattle and crops and things like that. What's interesting is a good combination of seeing family trees animated and shown on the screen, old documents and photos and things like that. And what you'll notice is that the three sisters, they each had a copy of the script that they had written together, and they're reading the story together, which is perfectly cool to do. They're sitting on their couch and they're actually reading the story.
We are the Columbia girls, Arnold and Claire's three children. I am Rochelle, the oldest. I was born on April 7th, 1954.
I'm Carol. I was born July 17th, 1955.
And I'm Bev. I was born August 7th, 1958. And since our dad, Arnold, isn't here to tell you his story, we're going to do our best to share it with you. Arnold passed away on January 9th, 2009, and we are thankful that he left us with his excellent account of the early part of his life and also the Columbia family history. We've assembled the information as best as we could in order to share it with you. We know Arnold would have loved to be the one telling you these stories, and we would have loved to have him here.
And with that sort of happy note, I'll turn it over to my brother Arnold, who's sitting over here on my right.
Well, I've been waiting to correct some of the statements that the seniors over here have made. I'm a young member of the Columbia family.
You can see how we used old camcorder footage that's not of the highest quality, but there's Arnold along with his brothers, all of whom have passed away, sitting there in a motel room, without any decent lighting, without any microphones or whatever, telling their stories firsthand out of their own point of view.
So where did we all come from? Before we get started, we'd like you to know that the Columbia family name started as Golembe in Russia, spelled Golembe. In North America, the name became Columbia, and in South Africa, the name became Golumbic. The change was probably the result of what the immigration officers heard when the Golembe family members arrived in those countries.
In most family history movies, the explanation of the family's surname is kind of a staple. Most of our families have names that have been passed along, typically through the male line. But what's interesting about families, and you'll see this a little further coming along here, is that there's also the maternal lines of the family. So most of us actually have, in our own backgrounds, we usually have four surnames in our family background, plus additional ones as the other wives have married in. And so, in any family movie, it kind of behooves us to explain a little bit about who those surnames are and where they came from.
Arnold's family history on both his mother's and father's side originated in Russia. Arnold's father, Philip Golembe, spoke of Henoch Golembe, the first Golembe we have any record of, but we do not know the name of his wife. Henoch was born in approximately 1775, and he died at the age of 105 from slipping off the roof of his cottage, where he had climbed up to do a repair or put out a small fire. Arnold's father had the view that Henoch would still be living today if it were not for the roof.
One of the things that's quite easy to do today is to find imagery online that you can use in your own personal family movies that relate to where your ancestors grew up, or happenings, events, all sorts of things that went on, that there's photos for, or paintings, and newspaper stories. It's amazing these days how many newspapers are now online that we can search by surname, by name, by date, by location, and find related documentation material and imagery to go along with a verbal telling of your ancestors' exploits.
Henoch Galumba and his wife had a son, Yitzhak. Yitzhak married Sora Basha in 1829 in Smorgon, Lithuania. Their marriage produced several children, one being a son, Shlema. Shlema married Ita Ashanovsky around 1877.
Baba Ita.
So what's interesting here is that in a lot of people's homes there are these very large framed, blown up photographs, and you'd be surprised how many people walk down the hallway to the bathroom and shimmy past these photos and they don't know who they are. Why? Most of them don't have name plaques on them. Most of them, if you lift it off the wall and turn around the picture, there's nothing written on the back of it. And so what you can see this sister's doing by actually holding up this picture of her ancestor and explaining who she is probably one of the most amazing gifts she could be doing to honor her ancestor.
Baba Ita died in Russia after having raised her 8 children. On her deathbed, she said to her children who were still in Russia at that time to make sure that all of them looked out for each other, that all of her children looked after each other, looked out for each other, no matter where they were. That was her biggest concern, and it was her last wish. That message was communicated by the family in Russia to the family on the farm in Saskatchewan, because Auntie Clara was communicating, corresponding with them for years from the farm. Many years later, when Auntie Clara was on her deathbed, she waited until I arrived in Saskatoon and reminded me of what Baba Ita said when she lay dying. It was very important for Auntie Clara, Baba Ita's granddaughter, to pass that message along and to make sure that all of us in the Columbia family remember to watch out for each other, to look out for each other, look after each other, always, in all generations.
You know, a lot of people think that a family history movie or film is really all about dates and places and facts. I actually differ. Having made dozens of these films over the last 2 decades, I think that, yeah, sure, you've got to get the facts and the dates and the places and the names into the movie. What is even more valuable is the values, the philosophies, the beliefs, the concepts that the family lived by, made their decisions by, that hung together with, and stating those clearly. Why? So the next generation, when they watch your movie, can take those in, and they may or may not agree with them, but at least they're going to be thinking about those topics. What a huge service that is for those young people to get that information, those values, those beliefs. What's the alternative? Well, they're going to pick up their beliefs and values from the internet, from social media, from the news stations, and I don't know if that's really how you want your family to be picking up what they care about.
By 1888, Shlema and Ita had 8 children, 6 boys and 2 girls. One of the boys was Arnold's father, and his name in Yiddish was Fiva, or Philip in English. Philip was born on September 3rd, 1884. Philip married Annie Arlinsky in 1912 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and by 1927 they had 5 children: Sam, Clara, Morton, Arnold, and Joseph.
Here's a great example of a census record being used on screen in a family movie. These also work great in family books, published on the page in a book. But you can see the names are actually being listed right here of all the family members. Remember, these enumerators would go door to door every 4 years, they still do, and list meticulously down the names in every single household. And it provides a great record of who your ancestors were how they lived, and the groupings that was considered to be normal.
Arnold married Claire Ruskin in 1949, and by 1958 they had 3 children. And here we are, Rochelle, Carol, and Beverly. The parents of Arnold's mother, Annie, were Nechama Rashavitsky and Shimon Aaron Arlinsky, who Arnold is named after. They were married around 1887 in Slonim, Russia, about 15 miles northwest of Minsk. They had 7 children, and it was Annie, born in January 1889, who was the eldest and who traveled to the United States when she was barely 20 years old. We'll tell you later how Philip and Annie met. Annie's siblings, who were Arnold's aunts and uncles, were Morris Joseph, Avram, Mary, Isaac, Louis, and Hyman Arlinsky. Philip's siblings, who were Arnold's aunts and uncles, were Jacob, Joseph, Fanny, Borach, Dina, Henoch, and Leba. We'll talk a little bit about some of them later on.
You might wonder what life was like in Russia. Shlomo Galemba, Arnold's grandfather, was a grain dealer and made a reasonably good living. His early death in 1888 created an almost impossible situation for his wife Ita to raise 8 children and continue to earn a living. The extended families helped out, and Ita became able to run a small store, bake bread to sell, grow a garden, raise chickens, and keep a cow. Shlomo's brothers, who lived in Vilna, took the older boys into their homes so that they could attend schools, as Ita believed very strongly in her children receiving a good education. Ita managed to keep the family together and made a sufficient living to get through a very difficult time. Around the age of 11, Philip, Arnold's father, got work and helped the family financially.
One of the things you're seeing here is this map on screen for quite a while. It's probably 20 seconds, 30 seconds, with an arrow pointing at the place, the ancestral home of this family in what is now Poland. And the thing about trying to document family history of ancestors who, we're talking about the 1800s, they didn't have cameras. And if they had a camera, where are the photos these days? Because often they get lost in the family tree amongst the 1,006 cousins that we each have. And so using some other kind of visuals in a film is super valuable, because as handsome as we all are, talking heads can be hard to watch for quite a while. So we put on a map, and there's a lot of great maps out there. We can even animate them and make them look really interesting.
My dad going from New York to Saskatchewan, and I think first of all he went to Ontario. He settled for a while in New York, he hated it, and he went to Toronto, I believe, and then he pedaled there and he hated it, and then he got pedaling out in the country, and that's where he had his first love with farming, and he used to stop at farmers overnight, and I think one of his favorite places was in Beaverton, Ontario, which happens to be very close to Peterborough, where Mort and Bess live now, and which was the home of the Ruskin family, which I and Mort married into.
The black flies, or bush flies, were terrible, and together with his yearning for the farm, he returned to the Bruce family in Beaverton. He helped Mr. Bruce through his busy summer season and then went to Western Canada on a harvest excursion. Philip's harvest excursion ended at Gainsborough, Saskatchewan, in the southeast corner of the province. It was his first experience seeing miles and miles of farmland and no trees. The farmer he worked with encouraged him to buy and break in a team of oxen. In addition, he bought a cow, a wagon, a plow, and the necessary accessories, all mainly second-hand. Early in the spring of 1906, Philip set out on his own, traveling as far as Hanley, Saskatchewan. A locator took him out to choose a homestead, and it was the northeast 1/4 of 16-27-9-W3rd, a mere 65 miles west of Hanley. The land chosen was part of a very wide valley with running water fed by natural springs. He was the 3rd settler in that township, an area 6 miles square. The village of McCrory came some 5 years later and was only 8 miles from his homestead.
For the first 3 months, Philip's house was a wagon box turned upside down. During this period, he broke 8 acres of land with his walking plow, and in addition built a sod barn which provided shelter for his cow and oxen and a kitchen and bedroom for him. Philip slept only for short periods during the summer months, only when it was too dark to work. Winters were spent in lumber camps in Manitoba or at whatever jobs were available to help support him the following summer. One of the neighbors looked after the oxen and cow during this time. Kitchen duties in lumber camps were not his favorite, so he would trade with others in the camp and would cut their hair. He actually became a very good barber and had more practice in later years when 4 sons came along. In 1911, Philip helped build the grade for the railway, which was coming from Saskatoon to Macrorie. He was paid $2 a day, $1 for the man and $1 for the oxen. He named his oxen after the Tsar's family, and we can guess that one of them was probably named Nicholas. As oxen can be very stubborn, it was his pleasure to prod them on to do more work. One of his oxen used to go down on his knees, and one day out of frustration, Philip punched the ox and broke his wrist. That did not stop Philip. He found some cloth to bind his wrist and he carried on. After all, the doctor was 65 miles away.
So that's just the first few minutes of this family film that's about 90 minutes long. If you think about it, you're covering, several ancestors going back, several generations. 90 minutes to cover all those lives is actually quite short. And as you go through your collection of photos and documents and genealogy, you'll realize you've got way more than even that to try to pack in to an hour or two. So if this is interesting for you and you've got a bunch of stuff and you want to think about putting it together into a film or a book, reach out. And what I specialize in is helping people figure out what the story is, figure out how to tell that story, whether I interview you or whether you sit down and type it yourself, whatever your aptitude is. Either way works. And then we put it all together and make the most amazing movie that your unborn great-grandchildren are ever going to have seen, and it's going to inspire them and help them know that they come from a long line of amazing people, and that if the ancestors did it, so can your descendants. I'm Corey Bretz.